Hello, my name is Andrea Thompson, and I'm the founder and director of the Film Girl Film Festival. I'm joined here by a few of the directors from our Drama Shorts Block 1. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone for joining me. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and I want to start by how I usually do. Just have all of you go around and have everybody, introduce yourselves and give a brief synopsis about what your film is about. So, Seven, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so my name is Okima Seven Gun, and I am the co-writer, co-producer, and director of Black Girl vs. Ambiguous. So I'm going to give you my log line. Logline is when a very determined brown-skinned girl gets thrown into an ongoing cycle of ethnically ambiguous acting auditions, tongue twister, she vows to challenge the systematic stereotypes of the entertainment world.
Excellent. And Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Addy, and I'm the co-producer director of Abortion Helpline. This is Lisa. This short film focuses on an abortion helpline for women who find that they're pregnant but can't afford an abortion, call in to try to raise money and get support to help them pay for their abortion. And the reason that they don't have the money for the abortion often is because of the Hyde Amendment, which was a law that forbids federal funds from being used to pay for an abortion. The women who have Medicaid insurance, which are and these are predominantly poor women and women of color, find that themselves in a real dilemma trying to raise hundreds of dollars in a matter of days or weeks to pay for their procedure.
And hello, Nicola. Thanks for joining us. We're just going around introducing ourselves, our names, and a brief synopsis of what our film is about. So would you like to go next?
Why, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Nicola Rose, and I am the producer and director of the film Gabrielle, which is the story of a 13-year-old girl who takes her first ballet class at the age of 13, and who encounters both bullying from her ballet teacher and then true friendship where she least expects it. So it's a story about knowing your worth. It's a story about finding your own talent and going with it.
Excellent. And yes, I asked the rest of the filmmakers this, but I intend to attempt to add this discussion at the end of the post roll for the shorts block. Add it to the online to the online shorts block. Do you mind?
No.
Excellent. Yeah, just double checking.
Do what you will.
I shall then. I'll hold you to that. And Shirin, can you please introduce yourself and your film to us?
Hi, my name is Shirin Raban, and I am the director and producer of Between the Shells. It's a film about an Iranian-American artist who creates dioramas out of seashells, and the film basically shows the journey of his life through his artwork, from being raised during World War II and going all the way through the Iranian Islamic Revolution and coming here to New York.
And last but not least, Carmen.
Hi everyone, I'm Carmen Vincent, and my film is Forever a Champion, a short documentary about the amazing wheelchair racer Claire Conan, who's from the UK. And despite overwhelming medical obstacles, she is going for the Tokyo Paralympics.
Excellent. And yeah, once again, thank you all for joining me. And all your films, they're such they're so excellent and such a wide variety of topics covered. So I guess, Carmen, I'd like to start with you. Address this question to you first. How did you meet your subject, and why did you decide to make a film about her?
Yeah, it was serendipity. I was doing a semester abroad in Cambridge in the UK and walked into my documentary filmmaking class the first day, and my professor gave me 24 hours to find a subject. And I didn't know anyone in the entire country. So I was
Oh,
running
wow.
around like churches, markets, like just trying to find someone who looked interesting. And I happened upon the Facebook group chat like for Cambridge, the city, and posted like, please, will someone tell their story? And she was the only one who replied. And thank God, because she's amazing. So it was meant to be. It was meant to be.
Wow, that's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
So no pressure to anyone else. Shirin, same question.
I actually knew Mr. Haruni for more than 40 years. So I knew him since I was a child, and him and my mother were advocates at the school during that time. It was after the revolution and during the war, and they were trying to keep the Jewish school from being taken over by the government. And what he did for me, which I guess later on after I made the film, I realized that he had created an art exhibit for the girls in the district. And he gave me an entire wall, and everybody had just like one piece. So for me, I guess I really always felt not indebted. I don't know. I just like he put an impression on me because he was an artist who saw my art and he recognized me. So for me, I really, every time I went back to New York to see him, my brothers were in school in New York, and I kept thinking, why is he not, if he is not putting his work in a museum? And after I went to visual anthropology master's program, I called and I said, can I come to New York and film you? And he said, why? And I said, well, because your work really needs to be seen, and you're not showing it to anyone, and you want it in a museum. So he said, okay. And it happened.
Wow. And Nicola?
The question was the genesis of the film. Was that it? Like what inspired the film?
Yeah. Their films, Shirin's and Carmen's, are about specific people. But what chose you to take your particular path for your film? Gabrielle, because that's fiction.
It's fiction, but all fiction is rooted, I guess, in some fact. And in my particular case, although I didn't have the experiences exactly that the character has, I did have an experience or a series of experiences as a teenager where I was bullied by somebody who was a grown-up or was supposed to be a grown-up. People who were in the position of teaching or of directing a play, or in some position where they should not be using the stature to bully people. But there's that expression, hurt people. The second hurt being a verb. And even though I don't think that excuses anything, I think that's probably always, if not, it has to be the reason behind that sort of behavior. It has to be because these people have suffered some kind of trauma themselves, because why else would an adult take out that kind of behavior on a teenager or a kid? Because it's just the power differential is so off. And that was something that I really wanted to tell a story about. I saw another film that was a beautiful short film called Sing from Hungary that won an Oscar a few years ago. And it was a story about corruption on a very small scale, but standing for on a very big scale. It had to do with a choir, like not to tell the whole story, but Reader's Digest version had to do with corruption within a choir in an elementary school. And that was when everything kind of came together in my head, and I made up in my mind, I mapped out the image of Gabrielle, and I think the story for Gabrielle. And I think the initial image in my mind was this girl who's 13 years old and taking her first ballet class among all these tiny little kids who come up to her, her hips. And everything else that's in that movie stemmed from like that one image. All went from there.
Yeah, definitely. And Barbara?
So my co-producer and director, Janet Goldwater, and I have been making films for about 30 years, and most of them have focused on, many of them have focused on reproductive rights issues. And Janet and I have not only made films about reproductive rights, but we've been activists in our right. And after Trump was elected in 2016, we said, oh my goodness, women are going to be even more embattled now when it comes to abortion access than they were before. What can we have to do something. And Janet had been on the board of the Women's Medical Fund, where we filmed our documentary. And part of her training involved listening to the calls of women, people calling in and telling their stories about why they needed financial help to get a procedure. And we thought this is something that, even people that support reproductive rights don't really know how much women that are poor are embattled by not being able to pay for this, and how that limits their access. So we joined with my son, who teaches film at a university here in Philadelphia, and the three of us made a short film. It was really in response to Trump's election. So,
And on Seven, I know that this is also a kind of a fictional film, not a documentary, but it's obviously inspired by the experiences of your lead actress who you worked with before.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to kind of make it more autobiographical for her, and probably you, because I have no doubt you've experienced this kind of the same thing.
Well,
even if you're not an actress.
Well, it's funny because I did act in the film. I had a small part, but so when I did A Sisterhood of Signatures last year, she was one of my main characters, which was Maya Hooks, and so I talked to her mother, and her mother was saying that she was experiencing some problems with some auditions, and that there may have been some colorism issues that she was noticing. So that was something that Maya wanted to talk about, but maybe she was a little bit frustrated and didn't know how to express it. So I kind of encouraged her and her mom to make a film about it. And so I kind of mentored her and took on the role of making that come to fruition. And we thought it was going to, only take a couple of months or whatever, but it ended up taking 8 months, which I'm glad for because it had a chance to had the opportunity to develop. But anyway, this is Maya Hooks' story. She's 12 years old, from Chicago, and she is very talented. She's already an award-winning screenwriter. And so this is her story. So I'm kind of repping for her. This is her story. And I wanted to make sure that her story was told correctly. And she's actually the executive producer on the film. So I wanted to make sure the story was told in a 12-year-old mind, because it is her story and told as accurately as possible. So there was a lot of things I didn't know in making the film, as far as I had done casting before, but I was enlightened about more about the casting process for young girls and for for middle school and people that age. So and the grueling process that they have to go to, as far as memorizing lines and actually just kind of being shuffled around, and sometimes they feel like they're treated as kind of like cattle instead of like children. So, I thought that was a delicate issue. And so she kind of expressed that in the film, the nervousness and all the things, because at that age, they're still impressionable, and so I felt as though it was important to for her to showcase how she felt in those auditions, and her, not only the perspective of the mother and the family, but also the perspective of the receptionist, and we go into the casting office and we kind of see everything that's going on there. So that's kind of the inspiration for the film. Also, it deals with some issues with colorism as well, and that's when the paper bag theory comes in. And I don't know if you guys know what that is. It is in the African American culture, in history, there's this thing called the paper bag theory. And so if you're darker than the paper bag, then you get treated differently. So that's kind of the theory behind the paper bag theory, and that's rooted in African American culture, as far as I would say, you might want to call it like classism, maybe. So that is one issue that I addressed in that film. I know that's a lengthy answer, but
No, we got time. And yeah, it's actually a good segue into my next question, because while none of your films could be called dark and depressing, but they do kind of tap into a lot of really dark topics like bullying, women feeling that, Barbara, in your case, women feeling like this trapped, desperate because they can't find funds for an abortion, for healthcare, war, and of course life changes that involve your dreams, like being treated differently because you're viewed as if you're disabled in the case of Carmen. So I've been asking this question to a few other filmmakers, so and I feel like your films all address this very, very well. Forgive me if I'm being a bit long-winded, but how, in your opinion, did you decide to address some of these topics, which are really difficult and in some cases still seen as very taboo? So long question. How do you address them? And yeah, how did you decide to take that route? Seven, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to that colorism issue. That was something that I think Maya was afraid to address, and so I kind of, as a co-writer, I told her, I said, you can't be afraid to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as the paper bag was concerned, when we included that paper bag scene in the film, she really liked it because it was very visual and it was kind of eerie. I don't want to say it was kind of like Get Out, but it was an eerie scene in there that made you really reflective of her perspective, and it was kind of like very, I don't want to say paranormal. It was very strange, but surreal at the same time. So there's a lot of things that you can do while addressing those issues. I think that was a good way to address that issue, because it's kind of like something that has to do with the psyche and the unknown. And so, we're addressing colorism. We're also addressing kind of like, child protection laws, how children are treated, how they feel during this process, because if you don't address these issues correctly, it can be kind of damaging, because they're so young and impressionable at that time. And also, I feel that this piece is important because it's her story, and she is going to remember this piece moving forward in her career as a screenwriter, as a director, and as a filmmaker. So it was important for me to mentor her on this journey and tell her not be afraid to tell the truth, even though it might be ugly or might hurt. And so I think when we actually included that paper bag scene in there, she loved it, and everybody else, they thought it was an excellent idea. So something that you may not think is a great idea may be, turn out to be something amazing and push the movie forward.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, how do you think, for people who don't have, I'm going to follow up this question with everybody else too. How do you think, for people who don't kind of have your outlets like the film and kind of creativity outlets, how do you think people, because it's finally permissible to address these topics really in the mainstream that people have been addressing between themselves for quite some time, it's finally permissible to talk about these things openly. How do you think people can do that?
Is that a question for me or for everybody?
For you for now, but I'm going to ask that to everybody.
So because they're in our society, I feel like everything is bubbling to the surface as far as race issues and just how I think people of color have been treated. I think that this is a great time to address those issues. So there's issues of racism, but there's also issues of colorism within the African diaspora. So those are a different set of issues. So, but this is a good time to address all of the issues because there's a healing process that needs to take place, and we need to look back in history and reflect and say, hey, this didn't work before. So we need to figure out how we can move forward and address it in a healing way and communicate and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Because in a lot of festivals that I'm seeing now is they're talking about healing and they're talking about mental, mental illness, and they're talking about just the state of the human psyche during this time. A lot of people are agitated. They're afraid because, the country is in unrest. You have the epidemic. So there's a lot of things going on right now, and they're kind of brewing up. And so this is a good time to address these issues and not wait. So this is a particularly good time to address any type of race issues, colorism issues, any prejudices that anybody has. And as you know, people that do have these issues with race and
I think there's a mega million men march going on right now. So clearly we do.
I mean, people are very vocal right now. Yeah, people are very vocal right now. And I think whether you are, I hate to say it, if you are a racist or if you do have these issues, I would want to know, because the thing of it is that, sometimes it's better to confront the issues out in front and instead of hiding behind different things. I want somebody to tell me, hey, I don't, if they don't like me because of my skin color, I'd rather have them tell me about it, because now I know what I'm dealing with. So I think this is a very important time because people are now saying what they're feeling, whether you are, prejudiced, you're not prejudiced, you're racist, you're not racist. I mean, you need to say how you feel. And then if you have those issues, they need to be addressed. And some of the issues are embedded deep in the psyche of individuals, but also in the systems of our country. But also, I just think it's how people are raised. You have to, in order to change, you have to address individual issues. And if you don't know what the issues are, and you don't have it in front of you, you can't address the issue. So the only way to change is to discuss it and bring it out into the forefront.
Definitely. And I think that really ties into Barbara's film, which takes these private personal struggles. So many of these women, we don't generally see the struggles of, frankly, low income women who find themselves in this situation. And Barbara, what I appreciate about your film is it really brings these women, puts them at the forefront, and the other women trying to help them while keeping everybody, while still kind of protecting them, protecting their identities, protecting, but you feel like you feel their pain very much. So why did you decide to address the issue of abortion and not just abortion, but healthcare access itself? Why did you decide to take this route? How did you find out about this?
Right. So, as I mentioned, Jan and I have been making films about reproductive rights for many years, but this is the first film in which we not only tackle reproductive rights and abortion access, but also the issue of systemic racism and economic injustice by looking at the laws that put women in this situation. And there's archival footage in the film of Congressman Henry Hyde, who is the person responsible for this law that prohibits women from using their health insurance, their federal health insurance for abortion, called the Hyde Amendment. And what he says on camera in the film is, I can't stop rich women or middle-class women from having an abortion, but I can stop poor women from that.
Oh yeah, he wasn't trying to hide what he was doing at all.
No, that it was totally that he was targeting his repressive law on poor women. Most of the women who need Medicaid insurance are women of color. I think 80% of the women that call the helpline, at least the one in Philadelphia, are women of color. So we felt it was important to not only show how difficult abortion access is, but also how it's targeting poor women and women of color. So then we decided that when we first started making the film, we thought that we were just going to see that in the film you see the counselors typing on a computer and they bring up information about each call, and we thought we would just see the computer screens. But we quickly realized that you really needed to hear the voices of the callers themselves and to hear their personal stories. And so we were able to craft a permission. The counselors would ask the callers if they would give us permission to record their calls if we promised to protect their identity. And we assured them that it would not affect how much money was their request for funds. Some women said no, but I would say like at least 3/4 of them said yes and agreed to let us record their calls. And then there were so many really painful calls. We had trouble, deciding which ones we were going to include.
Yeah, that must have been really, really heart-wrenching to have so many stories like that and have to kind of pick and choose. Okay, which story of this woman who's desperately trying to get help do we use?
Yeah, and interestingly, most of them already have children.
Yeah, so they know.
And they don't have partners who are willing to help them so much either.
Oh, since my second question of how we can do this is kind of complicated, I'm gonna move on to Nicola and ask and follow up with the second question, because yeah. All right, Nicola, how did for the issues, same question, for the issues in your film, why did you decide, which includes bullying, body shaming, and everything, why did you decide to take the approach you did?
Well, because honestly, it is just so widespread, and not just in the way that it's depicted in the film, but I think it kind of stands for all the different ways that people get shamed for factors of themselves that they can't necessarily control. And bullying so often is depicted in a very limited way, which is like either a Mean Girls kind of thing or a even more stereotypical, bully in the schoolyard stealing your money, kind of, extorting your lunch money kind of thing. And, these things exist obviously, but they are, they're archetypes because they don't really tell the story. And so, as I was saying earlier, I wanted to tell a story about bullying that had a really unfair power differential. And that is something that, is obviously dealt with a very light touch in the story because it's a lighthearted story. It's meant to be shown to children. But, if you look at the scandal in the Catholic Church, if you look at just what happens every day with, people who are supposed to be authority figures who use that, I'm not saying this is common, I'm saying the exceptions to what is perhaps the rule, who use that power to abuse young people. This is really important to see and hopefully to extrapolate from and say this must not happen just on this very, very low level. This must be a worse problem than what we're seeing of adults using their power over children in a way that they should not. As far as body image, that was a sort of a no-brainer because ballet is an obvious place to talk about, unhealthy body standards that people try to achieve and they can't achieve. But what is crazy is that every time that I've shown the film anywhere, truly anywhere, I will hear either during or after from somebody, whether it's, somebody within the festival, somebody who saw it at the festival, whoever, telling me, oh my gosh, I went through this, my daughter went through this. It's almost always a woman, although I've heard from men too. And as a matter of fact, one of the earliest feedbacks that I got on it was from a guy who had been told as a teenager he was too fat to play softball, and the script made him cry because here's Gabrielle, who's this girl in a ballet class, but for him that was, that wasn't a gendered thing. That was him being told you couldn't play softball. And that just showed me, because this was that showed me, okay, this is not just a chick flick. This is this has applications and implications way beyond the immediate thing that it's depicting. And it's just sad how often somebody will come up and tell me the abusive thing there. I'm not just picking on dance teachers here, but the abusive thing that so-and-so did. And what I hope is that some of these people have also had friends like Camille, who is the dancer that befriends Gabrielle in the story, because she sees what an unusual and talented person she is in so many ways. And she kind of idolizes her. And I hope that these people have come upon these people who get, unjustly made to feel bad about themselves, which they shouldn't be for one reason or another. I hope that they will also come upon people who look at them and see the thing in them that was there all along, that the abuser didn't,
Mm-hmm. And Shirin, why did you decide to take this particular route in discussing war and life and immigration and all that?
So this film took 4
Wow.
years to make, and because, like I said, first I wanted to just show his work. And in showing his work, I thought it's important for people to know who he is. So I went to New York with a slew of questions about his childhood, about his everything. And he also said, "Oh my gosh, you asked about my everything. Now you know everything about me." He was uncomfortable about that. Like I would ask about his marriage and how he was 20 years old and why did he marry her and what happened and how did it happen. I ended up cutting a lot of that out. But I think, for me, it really took about 2 or 3 years just to find that story. My main question was to find out, how did he bring this entire collection out of Iran? Because when I was 12, when the first time that I got to know about him was when he invited us to their home, and we went there, and he had this incredible, huge aquarium with the entire Jewish tribe basically moving through the Red Sea and coming out of Egypt, and with their mules and the wives and husbands and children. And I mean, it was a really fantastic, incredible piece that I never saw before and I have not seen since. So for me, I just couldn't understand how he could have ever brought that out of Iran with all the restrictions in the post office and all of that situation that was going on. So that was my question. But when I came back, when I went there, I was there for like maybe 3 days, and I did 2 days straight up shooting, 11 hours of footage, which gave me 3 hours of good footage. And from there, I made it 2 hours, 1 hour. And I was searching for the story. And the reason I was searching was there were so many stories and so much information that I had to cut out. I mean, he had so many stories to tell and all that. But I made the film, and then I met a documentary maker woman who said, "If you want me to see your film, I'll cut it into pieces." And I said, "Okay." So I did show it to her, and she said, "Come to my home." I went to her house. She watched maybe 15 minutes. She said, "Okay, cut this, cut that. Why?" But she really didn't tell me what to do. She asked me a lot of questions, which really was amazing. She said, "Why? Why are you making this film?" And, this was my second film, but for some reason I was really lost, maybe because it was so personal to me. It was hard for me to be objective. And I said, "Look, this is an ethnographic film. It's not like a Hollywood film, like a story goes, this is just the way it is." But something was really bugging me, and I just couldn't, sleep. So I went back and I just scrambled it up, and I took my books again, and I wrote my documentary books again, and I started to do my storyline, and where's the arc, where's the hook, what's the blah blah blah, and take this big sheet of paper. And so it took a while, and I think I figured it out. And at that time I realized that everything that I had thought about had to be thrown out of the window, and I had to come up with a different way. I had his children there, his grandchildren, how they do things. I thought his legacy were his children. I completely took all of that out. There's a lot that changed.
It sounds like there was a very instinctive, organic process.
Yeah, and I had
So-
focused on the transitions. But when people asked me questions and people watched the film too, I realized that people did not understand the historical and cultural context. That's when I decided to add all of that, the footage, and that took me another whole few months to research and to make it very, very succinct, to be able to just put it in there so people actually can follow along the story. I did not want to make a historical or political or religious film at all. And that's exactly what it became. And I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, some things are political by their very nature, even if we don't want to
So it
make
is.
like
That's
just
how-
a particular person in front of the camera political. And Carmen, why did you it was a very interesting way how you discovered your subject, and why did you decide to take your particular approach in tackling her story the way you did?
Yeah, I think I came at it from an angle of just pure, genuine curiosity. I'm trying not to be judgmental, trying not to make her feel like another. And our first time meeting, it was in a coffee shop, and I'm very clearly not physically disabled. And here she rolls in a wheelchair, and I immediately felt like my privilege and how do I ask her about her life, about her story? And I remembered the curiosity angle and just said, hey, can you tell me your story? Like what's your passion? The same questions you would ask someone who's not in a wheelchair. That's not her whole story, the fact that she's in a wheelchair, even though she is a wheelchair racer. And she's just an incredible person because she saw that I was a little uncomfortable in trying to ask the right questions the right way. And she's so transparent. To the point where I could start to be transparent about hey, I don't know how to ask you this question. And I think that's a common uncomfortable feeling that people may have around the discussion of disability, where if you're not the one with a disability, you don't know how to ask or respect when not to ask about it, or just how to go about that conversation. So that was a lesson to me, interacting with Claire, and I tried to emulate that same transparency, that same curiosity through the film.
Yeah, and that's kind of in a way answers my next question, and because the disabled community is really starting to make their voices heard. I think to a degree that was unprecedented before. So that kind of addresses how do we talk about that? Because so often when we depict disabled people on screen, they're not depicted as flawed individuals. They're depicted as these angelic beings who act as inspirational figures.
Exactly.
So can you kind of summarize how you avoided that path, because you definitely did not take that route in your documentary?
Thank you. Yeah, that was a concern of mine at first, and then I realized she has flaws. She's a flawed person like any of us, and to tell someone's story honestly and wholly, you have to show their struggles, and you have to show their bad days as well as their victories, because that gives the context to the whole person. So I think, with Crip Camp coming out and documentaries like that were excellent documentary. And I'm working on a documentary about a young woman with Down syndrome right now, where I'm facing the same task to show a holistic portrait of a person, a human being, without necessarily feeling like I have to paint them as this saint just because they have a disability, because that's not what they want.
Definitely.
And that's not what they deserve.
Shirin, how do you discuss the issues you did without making anyone a caricature? Because let's face it, a lot of the people that you and issues, and a lot of the people who grapple with these issues in your film, they're often portrayed in a very caricatured way too when people discuss these particular countries, this particular history. So if people want to do this who don't have your outlet, how can they avoid that?
It was a struggle for me. When I took a the film, I really had to cut. I actually had to cut a lot of the sentiments that my subject was saying. He had heartfelt feelings about, his adversaries, and I had to clean it up. I saw it and I was very happy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such an emotional content. I love to show it to the world. But you kind of have to filter things to the point that you don't cut the content, you don't lose the message, but at least you have to present it in a way that it's digestible and respectable, to people and by people. And I mean, I had a lot of issues, like worries, because, about talking about Judaism, talking about the Holocaust, talking about, I don't know, Israel, and talking about being religious or not being religious. And one of my fears was that the Iranian Jewish community would not be interested in the film because they would think that, oh, this subject is not Jewish anymore. So, or he doesn't believe in it or whatever. I mean, he is Jewish, but he's not religious anymore. And then I realized, I mean, one of the things I learned making the film was that people are who they are and they think what they think, and it's okay. I really was even not very comfortable showing my film in the university that I worked because it felt kind of personal, honestly. And but I am talking about it. I am telling my students and everybody else because this is part of life, and it has aspects that some people like and some people don't like, and you can talk about it. Like, for example, this figure of Reza Shah, who was a dictator in Iran, and he was a nationalist. Given the times right now, if you talk about certain issues, it's really taboo here. But when you talk about it about like 80 years ago, it's completely different context. And the fact that Reza Shah was very pro-Hitler and very pro-German in that time because he loved the technology and he brought it in, and he was a dictator. And at the same time, he did allow the Jews from Hungary to come to Iran, get Iranian passports to escape the Holocaust. It's such a controversial, complex situation that I couldn't really explain in my historical context. So I just had to understand that it is what it is, and at least people, it opens a conversation, then people will ask, and then maybe we have a conversation about it.
And Nicola, how did you decide to take your approach in your film to discussing, like, most films that address this kind of thing, they don't address like how adults often take part in bullying children. They don't just ignore it. They actively also participate in bullying. So how did you just kind of do that without while also making everyone a person, which is still a difficult thing to do, sadly, on film. It's easy to caricature everyone in this.
It is very difficult, and I mean, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it is very easy to caricature people, especially when you're dealing with a film that is, in my case, 15 minutes. And already that's pretty, that's a pretty generous space to work with. Some films are 7 minutes or 4 minutes. And the trick is always, how do you not reduce these people to a caricature? Because, society knows caricatures. Society, in a way, likes caricatures. It's something that's easy to understand, but people are rarely that one-dimensional. And I think that's the thing that I was talking earlier about, that idea that hurt people. And, we didn't have necessarily the space or the time or the bandwidth in the story to talk about how the ballet teacher, what her background might have been. But the curious thing was that I and Valeria Korenaya, who's the Russian actress who played the teacher, we both separately came up with a backstory for the teacher that was very much the same. And I thought that was kind of cool because, in my mind, yes, I had some idea for why she was the way she was, that in a longer movie you might have put in that would have made her much more sympathetic, or at least, a little more sympathetic. But in this particular case, we didn't have time to do that. But the fact that it was alive in her mind, that I think the story, long and short of it was that she was a very good dancer. She was in the Bolshoi Ballet. You know, she had gotten to a certain point in the corps,
Mhm.
but that she didn't get beyond there. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if, you know, she got pregnant. I don't know if it was a family thing. I don't know if, you know, she just wasn't good enough, really. But whatever it was, it made her so angry. And
Mhm.
you know, some of that is nature, some of it is choices, because you see people also who have had like literally the worst things happen to them in their lives, people who are concentration camp survivors or something, and they come out of that and they're so cheery and happy, or you know, they have cancer and whatever, but they're so positive. And I've seen this, we've all seen it, and it really just does have to do with like attitude and neurochemistry and all these other things that make us who we are. What was your question originally? I know I went through another thought there that I wanted to, how to avoid making people caricature.
Yeah.
So here's the curiosity is that,
Did you avoid that? Yeah.
yeah, well, you know, by trying to put as many details on the screen as possible, and that was, you know, largely by hiring a really good actress who could play both the drama and the comedy of this lady. And she's very particular, you know, she has an accent, she has a very distinctive look, she's interesting to watch, and she's just very talented. And yeah, you hate her, but at the same time, she's very appealing. So that's kind of that's the duality of her. What is curious is that, you know, obviously, yes, there are cases where adults bully children. I wouldn't call it common, but we've all heard of it. And yet I have gotten some flack over the past year and a half that Gabrielle has been in the world. Occasionally, I will hear from people who are really quite upset that that a teacher was depicted as being mean to a kid. You know, kind of, how dare you?
It
That would never
happens.
happen. Yeah, I know, but I hear it wouldn't. I've been informed that it wouldn't happen. I've
Yeah,
always
teachers-
thank you for informing me.
Yeah, adults are human too.
Because
Terrible.
because all educators are the same, right?
There's so many wonderful educators out there, and you know, I would hope that nobody would ever take it as some sort of comment on educators, because that's the last thing it would ever be intended. I would ever intend.
You know,
I'm
I am
a
a
teacher, so I
teacher.
teach French, but you know,
I'm an educator, and
Yeah.
I had the worst first class teacher. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was writing a whole thing about, you know, Red Riding Hood and the real big bad wolf.
yeah.
It was my teacher, you know. And when I saw your film, it really resonated with me.
Oh gosh,
Maybe sometimes you want to be a teacher because you had a really bad teacher.
that's why I'm a director, because
I really don't want to be like her.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. It's like
Teachers
you
really
learn by,
exist. They really do.
Mhm.
learn by negative examples sometimes. Like that actually teaches you how to be the thing that you wish you had met in somebody
Yeah,
else.
Mhm.
If you
Also,
have
in
to
some parts
experience
of
that.
the world, they exist more than they exist here in the United States. Sometimes, you know, it's more child friendly, or there are rules and laws to protect children in the school. But if you go to the Middle East or Russia, I'm sure, you know, there are teachers who really are very mean to students. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, probably everywhere, despite protections.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
Barbara, I wanna get your take, like, because you captured a lot of people kind of at their most desperate, but still depicted them human, but also the people trying to help them. You very matter of factly depicted them as human too, like they weren't these angels who were completely understanding all the time. Like they clearly wanted to help, but you could also see the armor they had to put up, like hearing this all the time. So how did you avoid like making anyone not making anyone a stereotype?
You know, I actually think because they didn't fit into any kind of stereotypical category. The women who serve as the counselors are generally college students,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or professional nursing students, and this is their work study, and they feel very passionate about the women that they're trying to help.
Definitely, that came across.
Never condescended, but they never condescended to them. I mean, they're also struggling with having a very like limited amount of funds that they can tap to help these women. So they're working within these constraints. but they're sympathetic, but they also have, like I said, constraints around them. So they may feel, oh my goodness, I want to, give this woman like everything, to pay for her entire procedure, but I just don't have the money. They're looking at that dollar sign on their computer, and it's, going down, 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 as their sessions go on, and so they're working within those constraints. So, yeah, I mean, we felt like we depicted them, pretty accurately to the way they were, and certainly with the women that were calling in. I mean, their stories were there was so much pain in their lived experiences, and the counselors felt that and were sympathetic. So,
Definitely, definitely, and that
It was
all
not
came across everyone.
for us not to make them caricatures because they weren't.
And to bring it up a little bit, to maybe ask less complex questions, a less complex question for you. I'm going to start with 7. I'm just going to ask, what do you love most about what you do? Like, why do you love filmmaking so much? Because all of you clearly love it.
What I love most about filmmaking is that I get to tell stories and I get to talk about perspectives that may not normally be portrayed. Like Black Girl versus Ambiguous. That was Maya Hook's story, and so probably, if I hadn't encouraged her, maybe somebody else may have done it, but I was just proud that I helped her, I mentored her, and kind of, pushed her to tell her truth. And so I was proud about that. But as far as filmmaking in general, I just like telling stories. I haven't done any documentaries yet, maybe that's coming down the pipe for me. But I just love telling stories. I like telling other people's stories. I like doing research too. So, part of being a filmmaker is doing research, talking to people, networking. I think that filmmaking is a process, and you have to be patient and diligent. And I'm learning those things, as I'm getting older, and I'm also doing more films, that it's a process, and there's different movable parts, and all the parts kind of have to mesh together to become, to become a great film. And so there might be circumstances that might permit you from doing certain things, but you have to push through that, because if you have a vision and a goal, these things will come through. And I think that it starts with an idea, and I love that it starts, with an idea, and it ends up being this phenomenal type of thing where people have feelings and they have reflections based on seeing your film. And I really love that I'm able to share these films with other filmmakers and in larger audiences. So I love that feeling, and getting the feedback of, how people feel about my, about my films. So that's the greatest part of filmmaking.
Excellent. And Barbara?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know, I think of myself as an activist, not just as a filmmaker. So as an activist, I feel like films allow me to tell personal stories that highlight the issues that I care about a lot about, and that I want other people to learn more about. So for me, filmmaking is a really good vehicle for that.
And Nicola?
I'm unmuting myself. Here we go.
All right.
I think I got into filmmaking a little bit by mistake. I started out acting, and then at some point after I got into filmmaking, I accidentally stopped acting. I found that what I really thrived on much more than
Sorry
acting.
about that. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Go on. Yeah, video just popped up, and I had to. I was trying to. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I
Silence.
was just
So
gonna
sorry
say,
about that.
I found that what I
Mhm.
thrived on so much more than acting was being able to actually create the world and people it with interesting personalities and faces and experiences and people who might not necessarily have been on camera in other movies and people who might not necessarily have gotten their perspectives shown. And as a director, I see my role as being the conductor of an orchestra. I don't get to dictate the piece of music. I don't get to dictate actually how they play it because they're the musicians. They bring what they bring to it. But my job is to turn up this here and turn down that there, and bring out the brass section, and that is something that I find I'm much more suited to do than I was ever suited to being one of the performers. I think actors. I think actors have the toughest job that there is in the industry because they are at the mercy of so much. They have no control. I mean, if they have control, it's a modicum of control. It's so very little control over what they do. I'm not thinking about documentaries here, and this is not to exclude that from the conversation. I'm just, because I know so many of you are documentarians, I'm thinking of just, people who act, because that is what I started out doing and what I stopped doing. And, more power to these people who keep plugging at that every day because they're not in control of their destiny, and yet they are determined to be. And they keep doing.
That's similar to what I hear about a lot of actors turned directors too. So
I think a lot of people start not to prolong what I was saying, but you reminded me. I think a lot of people start a lot of people who are actors originally, if they start directing, it's because they want to create work for themselves. And
more
that's
control over the story. Yeah.
And I think there is, and you hear that in keeping with the theme of this festival. You hear that from women a lot. It's like, they're only shitty roles for women, so I want to create a really good one, and whether or not that's entirely true, it's a fair statement. So it's something that the end result is not always great when we decide to make our own work and have ourselves at the center of it. It can work, wonderful when it does. But I never thought I would personally be so happy behind the camera. My 16-year-old self would just be appalled. She'd think I sold out. But anyway.
Typical of a lot of teenagers. Shireen, what do you love most about filmmaking?
I'm very visual. I would say I call myself a visual storyteller. And I really love creating conversations between people who are from different sides. And I think I was born that way, to parents who are both Jewish, but from completely different parts of society, even different cities. And even within that, you may, it's hard to see, but there's a lot of nuance. And I just, everything has been about duality in my life, including being an immigrant. And, I was born in Wisconsin, raised in Iran.
Wow.
Came to Sweden when I was a little kid for maybe a summer, and that really changed. I've always been able to see things from the point of view of the other person, and for that reason, I like creating these conversations and sharing people's experiences. But also, I'm a graphic designer turned filmmaker, and now that I am, after the 6 years that I've been involved in this, I'm finally realizing that I wish I had become a filmmaker from the beginning. And I had no clue. I had no idea. Sometimes I may have had a dream, and then I would wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this dream. And then my husband would say, oh, baby, we better go make a film. But I was like, oh yeah, in another life. I always thought I was too old. It was too late. And then my children went to college, and that's when I went back to grad school. But I think for me, what I love about filmmaking is that like directing a film or making a film is the flexibility that you have to have. And I have, like, everything that I have is suited to this, whereas in graphic design or other entities that it wasn't. So you have to follow a lot of rules. Here you got to know when to break them. It's lovely. I love that. And just the fact that you work with other people and you're not alone, you know,
Mhm.
that I think is what I'm craving. So.
Mhm. And Carmen?
Yeah, I mean, since I was 12, I think I heard this quote when I was 12, and it's stuck with me ever since. Maya Angelou once said, "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." And I think that's really driven me to not validate people, but to help them feel like their voice is worth being heard by telling stories. And that's why I've gravitated towards documentary. Yeah, and also just the experience of getting so deeply close with someone because they know you're responsible for telling their story because you're holding the camera and you're controlling the edit. Like that's such a deep, powerful relationship. So I feel like that just gives so much meaning to my life, making relationships like that. It's almost like adding to my family. It's really powerful for me.
And we are actually out of time, but with every filmmaker discussion I do, I want to ask one last question about the future. So can you all just kind of briefly tell me what's next for you? Carmen, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, right now I'm working on a short documentary about a young woman's experience with Down syndrome. It's called Teacher of Patience. It should be out in the beginning of next year.
You're kind of fading out. Is she fading out for all of you?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm working on a short documentary about a young woman with Down syndrome called Teacher of Patience, and that can be seen on any of my social media. So that's what's next for me right now.
Excellent.
Thanks.
And Shirin?
I'm beginning to put together my thoughts on making a film about an Iranian Jewish man who was a high-ranking military official, and that's something that's very unusual. He passed away a few weeks ago, and so it was in the family. And I'm gonna take the story of his daughter, actually, from her point of view, as I guess as a generational continuity, but also this one is going to be political and historical because it's going to have a lot of footage about, during the revolution and Iranian history, and also an immigrant in America.
And
A dethroned immigrant.
Oh, excellent. And Nicola?
So I did one more short film after Gabrielle, which is just now beginning its festival run. And then after that, I pretty much felt I had to graduate to feature films. So my first feature film is now well into pre-production, and we have our dates set. We know when and where we're going to be filming. That'll be next June.
Congratulations.
Thank
I hope
you.
you get to actually film soon without, worrying about, spreading a dangerous virus.
Well, we have our COVID plan. That itself is a whole other conversation, but I'm very grateful and lucky for my co-producer who actually did a feature film in September and, kept everybody safe and healthy and quarantined in the right way. So
Excellent. Glad to hear some good news that it is done safely.
it is possible. Yeah. There's stuff out there. There's information. It's just, nothing is without risk, but it's doable.
And Barbara?
I don't have another film in the works yet, but we are starting an impact and engagement campaign for Abortion Helpline to have lots of virtual screenings and webinars, and there are political implications for the film. So if the Democrats can take the Senate, there actually might be some changes to the laws that will help, poor women. But we're trying to get it out now to want the people to create awareness about the issue.
Fingers crossed. And you can't see me, but I am crossing them, literally. And Seven?
Fingers and toes.
And Seven?
For next year, I think I'm going to focus on doing some more shorts. But right now, I have another short that's in the festival circuit right now. And as you know, I try to squeeze it in.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm sorry, we've got all the things that I'm like, I can't take it.
Yeah, it was a little late. Yeah, because I shot it late. Anyway, it's called Black Mama Sable, and I'm going to give you the log line for that. It's after the Chicago riots of 2020. A rebellious teenager goes to visit her mystical grandmother over the summer to discover the origins of the struggles of African Americans. So that's being received very well right now.
Sure,
So
rub it in.
I made that in August.
Sure, rub it
Uh-huh.
in. But yeah, seriously,
Oh,
glad for you, so glad.
No. So that was interesting to make because it somebody told me like this ripped from the headlines because when we made it in August and they were still rioting and I was like, oh my gosh, is this never going to end? And it's still happening. So that's the weird thing about it. The pandemic is still happening, the riots, the protesting. So I never thought it was going to keep happening when I made the film. So I think that's the interesting thing about that film. So
Definitely. Okay, and that's our time. So I want to thank you once again for allowing me to screen your film in the festival and for joining me here and for giving such interesting answers to all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice meeting all of
Really
you.
appreciate
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye bye.